I'm Nick Hernandez, and you're listening to the Positivity Matters podcast. We talk with leaders from a variety of fields, well-being researchers. We are focused on what contributes to human flourishing, be that for the individual, the organization, or a community. Today, my guest is Joshua Berry. He is a world-class facilitator of change. As an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and director of Iconic, Joshua has spent the last 2 decades evolving the what, who, and why of Fortune 500 companies and venture backed startups. You can learn more about his work at econic.co and joshuaberry.com. That's econic.co and joshuaberry.com. So great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Nick. Let's get into the show.
Indeed. I heard you at the Do More Good Movement Summit last spring, and I loved your presentation and your willingness to dare to be naive. And I hear that you wrote the book on that. Tell us more.
Yeah, I we just celebrated a year of that book, Dare to Be Naive, which was an exciting, my first book, and an exciting approach that was really born from this idea that a number of people think that being naive is a negative thing. And well, my research actually started to show that the fear of being seen as naive actually prevents a lot of people from experiencing more joy and flourishing in their lives.
That is pretty fascinating. And I think that that is a very good limiting belief that you put your finger on directly. Was that something that was a challenge that you had to overcome yourself, or was it something that you realized that other people were getting caught up on and felt like you had something to say about it, or
Yeah.
something else? Tell
Yeah,
tell us the
I would
story.
I would say it's a little bit of both. It was in the interviews that I was doing before the book even had a name. I was very curious about leaders who were using their businesses for good, right? And one of the things that I heard a couple of times as I went back and re-listened to those interviews was a number of them would say, "This sounds naive, but," and then they would share something amazing. And so that was one of the first curiosities, is why more than one person used that kind of shield or qualifier of being seen as naive as a thing. So that got me curious about what actually naivete is and why do we fear it. And then, yeah, there is a personal story to it too, that I routinely felt like I needed to show up as the smartest person in the room, and oftentimes would argue and need to be right, even when that was maybe not what was best for the situation or myself, etc. And that sometimes I would even hold back some of my thoughts because I would fear that other people would think that they were naive or too good to be true or too optimistic or whatnot. And so, yeah, there's part of writing the book for myself, I'm sure too.
Very cool. All right. So we mentioned the name of your firm, Econic. Tell us, what is it? What does it do?
Yep, Econic is a consulting company that focuses on organizational, strategic, and innovation related projects for companies. Um, Many times we go in and we find important projects for companies, and we help them get those strategies done in ways that involve our team's amazing capabilities around facilitation, program design, experience design, etc. And so that has looked like everything from custom leadership development programs to uh, innovation labs where we've helped charter and build and hire and set up these innovation labs for companies, to strategic planning, to facilitating retreats, to all sorts of things over our almost 10 years in existence.
Very cool. What are some of your favorite experiences over the years with that?
Uh, I'll share a couple of them quick. One, we were doing some innovation related work for a large agricultural equipment manufacturer that has a deer in their logo and is green and yellow, and helping them set up some internal accelerator programs. So helping them take some of their more advanced projects and teaching teams how to be more curious and how to run experiments and come up with hypotheses and de-risk assumptions that they're working on. That was fun because it was an early application of some of the things that we knew from the startup world into the corporate world. This was, again, almost 10 years ago. And what was also fun then is it resonated so much with their counterparts over in Germany that we got to go over and for a couple of years replicate some of those programs in Kaiserslautern. And it was fun just to again see how international that idea of, hey, we should go be empathetic and learn what customers actually need, and then come up with experiments that we could run that would allow us to, in more lean and efficient ways, test some of the ideas that we have. So that's one on the innovation side that was a fun experience. Maybe on the leadership side, as something brand new that we're working on, we've just launched something that we call the Evolving Leaders Initiative. And it's really calling out this need that we see in today's society that many senior and emerging leaders get stuck behind limiting beliefs that they have. And they really need spaces to collaborate and grow with other people around them and work through those things that maybe served them to get to a certain spot, but need to be challenged so that they can have breakthrough growth for themselves or their teams or their organizations. And we've been doing that in kind of offsite retreat settings. So specifically around the experience design, offsite retreat settings in nature, where people can unbutton the collar and get real with each other in ways that have already experienced some amazing growth for those people.
Very cool. Would that be leaders from various fields or like non-competing fields, kind of, or would
Yeah,
that
that's
be
yeah, that's
putting?
done. Mhm.
I'm assuming not direct competitors.
Yeah, we're not bringing together direct competitors. An example, the last one that we had a president from a telecommunications firm, a CEO from a hospital, an executive director of a nonprofit, another senior exec from an engineering firm. So yeah, variety of disciplines. Probably the commonality is a certain level of leadership and complexity in their jobs, but also in their worlds in terms of questioning like what's next and where am I going, and an openness to exploring that.
That must be a incredible place to observe human behavior from.
It is, and it goes back to experience design. Can we make it a brave slash safe enough space for people to be able to lean into those things and feel like they can actually share some of that? And I'm sure, Nick, you've been in those situations where you're surprised after just a couple of days of new people coming together, the levels of comfort and trust that they're able to build with each other and the depths that they're able to go with each other. So I always love it because it shows the possibility and the potential of what can be done with intentional experience design and willing people who are ready to lean in, be reflective, and growth oriented.
Love that. Before we began the podcast, I shared the theory of human flourishing with you that I've come up with the extremely clever acronym Happy Life. But as you were just sharing a little bit there, I was running the framework that I came up with through my mind as you were saying that, putting things into the various buckets, and it sounds like you're kind of doing it all with with what you've been up to. I heard like curiosity, the nature part of it, like thinking about values, you're, I think, creating positive a space for positive social interaction to emerge. And I'm guessing there's a lot of people getting into the zone through conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And play. I think that there's definitely some play in there. There's definitely to your why, some yes saying to figuring out meaning and purpose and kind of stripping back some preconceived notions of things. Mhm.
and when you mentioned limiting beliefs, are there some like top contenders that are sort of preventing people from realizing the fullest extent of their capabilities, or is it kind of just all over the place, or have patterns emerged in the what limiting beliefs have come up?
Yeah. There are quite a few that keep coming up, but I would say some of the more common ones are uh, uh, a really surprising one around servant leadership. Um, and what I mean by that is this belief that I always have to put others first. And the why that is a limiting belief is because most limiting beliefs are ones that still work for us in some ways. It's just there might be some things about it that might be limiting from another level of growth. So, an interesting point with that is uh, we found some people that servant leadership has become a limiting belief because they interpret it to mean uh, that they should do things that actually end up with lack of self-care, and they don't realize that it's probably a something to be managed, a spectrum of serving others as well as making sure that you're taking care of yourself. So that's an interesting self limiting belief that has come up a number of times. I can share a couple more, but I'll just pause it to see if you have any reactions to that.
Yeah, I feel a major tangent coming on a little bit here, and that is that I'll take us on for a moment, and that is like you said. Do you remember like Pee Wee's Playhouse on Saturday morning,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
Saturday morning television stuff? I feel like you said like the word of the day when everybody goes crazy, and that's servant leadership. That's one for me. So, uh, because when I first really got interested in the community building, there was the practical side of it, and then also like the classroom side of it. And the guide to my classroom experience had brought up a essay on servant leadership by a Quaker, Robert K. Greenleaf, and it was the framework from which the professor taught us about the world of philanthropy and the nonprofit sector. And I am just going to read this here. This is from Robert Greenleaf, and he lays out a bunch of different characteristics of what that looks like. But in the end, he writes, the best test of servant leadership is this: do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to serve? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? Um, and so that is really fascinating that that is one of the limiting beliefs. And it's sort of like they feel this deep passion for living those values that I just read, but they take themselves out of that circle, is what it sounds like.
Yeah. 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 It is interesting. And it goes maybe you were talking before we got on about seeds of kindness and seeds of happiness. For myself, I know that when I do kind acts, yes, I do receive something back from it as well. What's interesting about this is, this best test of servant leadership, I think you said, is do those served grow as persons? And then the things you said after that, it's all very much other oriented. And so that is very much the positive side of servant leadership, but taken in the wrong way or maybe to the extreme, it may end up with not also that reflection back to how am I also being served? Like there's a feeling like, oh, that's selfish if I think like servant leadership is fully like last will be first, first will be last type of thinking. And uh, that's why the 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 framework that I use in the book and others around limiting beliefs is inspired by the work of Byron Katie. And she just says it so well in terms of all of these beliefs have something that you're always going to gain and something that you're going to lose. Because, and this is from another author, Kevin Birmingham, beliefs are mental models. They're our best guess at how reality works. And so they're not perfect objective truths. And so there's always going to be something that you're gaining or losing from it. Uh, I'll give you another example. A limiting belief that's come up a couple of times for others is you're green and growing or you're brown and dying, right? And you use
Hmm.
that for yourself as a growth-minded individual, or maybe your organization that you're leading, et cetera. You have to be growing, green and growing. Um, there's a lot that you can gain from that. And unless you like take a step back and say, like, okay, is there anything that I lose by holding that belief? And you acknowledge that. It doesn't mean you have to stop it or change it, but at least there's an acknowledgement to that maybe if all I do is pursue green and growing or brown and dying, you're actually maybe going against even what nature teaches us in terms of unless we're maybe San Diego or Boqueta, Panama. Like I think it isn't always green and growing all of the time. There are cycles and seasons to life, and so I just shared that again as sometimes these are beliefs that almost always have served people to a certain extent, and creating space to reflect to say, do I intentionally want to continue with this belief and the actions that result from that is healthy for any leader.
Ah, yeah, that is really fascinating. With those two limiting beliefs right there, I'm thinking to my own personal core values, and one of them, I would say my top core value is treat yourself and others like you would a good friend.
Hmm.
So it does take the focus slightly outside of the self,
Hmm.
but it doesn't put it solely on the other. It has the mediating factor of the ideal of friendship. And I think that the nature of friendship is such that the deep friendship that comes to a point where the I see the other person's well-being just as part of my own, and so that's not always the case that friendship exists in relationship between leaders and others. But I think it's a good ideal to think about in terms of how I act, and that is my way of trying to prevent that from happening to myself with what you mentioned in terms of serving others. So it's like I was trying to think of how can I find a balance point where I'm not just a selfish fill in the blank,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
nor that am I going to wind up being a doormat. I guess those are kind of the worries maybe around that, perhaps. But
yeah. But it's not binary, and I think
yeah,
that's what you're calling out there. Like it's a tension to be managed.
yeah. And then that other one, it really makes me think about like, well, green and growing, yeah, there is something to that is necessary and vital, but there's also like moments of rest and moments of leisure where, it may just be play where there's not like a real, the focus isn't on growing. It's maybe for times just having fun. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like just because it's not green and growing doesn't mean it's brown and dying. I guess that was kind of the what came
Well
to
said.
mind for
Well
that
said.
one.
It's not
So
one or the other.
yeah. All right. Well, I shared a core value. I don't know. I know not. It's is that something that you've ever done? Like crank out like a purpose statement for yourself that may or may not include mission, vision, values. Are there any, if you have that you'd be willing to share about? Um, and
Yeah.
then maybe we'll talk about strengths.
Sure. A purpose that I live by is to evolve school and work to unleash human potential on the world's biggest problems. And what that means to me is that a lot of my role that I see in that and my purpose is I am a great space holder for individuals, for people working through the changing of systems and whatnot. And I'm working towards almost in all of those situations things that help um, to create more freedom for human potential to flourish, which is a great segue into my strengths. I know you were interested in my Gallup strengths. My first one, basically, all five of my top five get into um, what I just shared there, right? Strategic and maximizer being my top two. Like that's all about like where's the maximization of human potential and where people are at. And my other ones around ideation, futuristic, and individualization are all about the what ifs and ability to be able to see for individuals where things might go for them. So, how they might evolve and how that potential can continue to evolve so that they can then work on those problems that are placed in front of them. That links back to that purpose statement that I shared.
Love that. There's a one thing that I am torn on, and that is, like you mentioned, to solve the world's biggest problems. And there's a lot of suffering in the world. And I don't know if by biggest problems you mean the prevention and alleviation of suffering. So, what do you mean by the biggest problems, I guess?
I I don't know because I think that they're shifting all of the time. Suffering in all of its forms is absolutely some of those. Um, and I would extend that beyond human suffering, um, to Earth and other animals and organisms. I think world's biggest problems could be very small in terms of the relationships that we have with each other and divisiveness and seeing each other as more different than same. Um, which again, you could say that that's a form of suffering, I guess, too, but probably not to the extremes that most people would define it as. Um, and then the classics of energy and climate and resources and war and manipulation and all materialism and all of those other things that are out there. I think there's always tensions and things for us to be working on. And what I've at least understood for myself now over the last several years is uh, there isn't like a cause specifically that I'm like, that's the cause that I most want to dig into. Um, my the cause, if I were to name it, is truly people understanding more of the difference that they are wanting and meant to have in the world and how they can be unleashed from the systems or limiting beliefs that they impose or have had imposed upon them uh, in the carrying through of the work that is meeting them in this world.
I'm hearing your strengths come out as you're saying that. So I can see your futuristic is a well-oiled machine. So I asked that because can I be naive for a moment?
Course, go for it.
Okay, this is me at my most naive, and that's like I'm gonna start envisioning the world I would like to see, beginning with all the problems already being solved. So disease, violence between humans, violence towards animals, the environment. Let's say it's all solved. There's still this idea that fascinates me that we have all these strengths and capabilities that wouldn't necessarily be like manifested to their full. So there, it feels like the realms of beauty and play would be the places in which human energy would be spent, like in such a world. And so I kind of try to take my futuristic all the way to that place.
Hmm.
Think about what would world building look like in such a world, and then sort of bring that picture back into the world that we actually live in. And then it's like I've seen these various programs. I believe one of the presenters at the Do More Good movement was 1% for the planet. I think there's also like a 1% or pledge 1%. I think that one's like maybe 1% of your profits or revenue
Yeah, we're
towards.
Econic is a Pledge 1% member.
Okay,
Yep.
you tell me about it.
Oh yeah.
I'll,
No,
I'll be
it's,
quiet for a
no, no,
second.
no, no, no. You just you more or less got it right. But go ahead. Go with your point though.
Yeah, that in terms of our energy, maybe most should be on dealing with the actual like problems and what can we do to prevent and alleviate suffering. But part of me is like, let's set all that aside and say like 1% of human energy should go towards just building strengths for their own sake and envisioning like what it looks like to pretend like we're in that world already. And I think in so doing that there may be some practical things that could come from that actually.
Yeah.
So that's my 1% idea.
Well, I like it, and it relates to I was working yesterday on a keynote I'm giving soon around the practice of appreciative inquiry. Surely you've come across this in your Positivity Matters work. The it's 4 decades old approach that's more strength-based improvement modeling. And it came out, I think the 80s was one of the first places where David Cooper Ryder started doing this research. And it was around this idea of what if process and project and its insert improvement was actually focused on replicating what went well instead of complete deficit and error seeking and trying to root out those deficits. And so a lot of the appreciative inquiry work is done by bringing groups of people together, or typically large groups of people together, and trying to mine for stories of excellence when things were at their best, and what can we learn from each of those things, and then how do we find the themes around that, and how we might replicate some of those. And so I share that just to say there's even some modeling and approaches that are very tangible and don't require us orchestrating 1% of the entire world's energy that are focused on how do we understand these strengths that we have organizationally and replicate those things so that we could live as if that was a normal daily occurrence more consistently.
So my follow-up question is, who is more naive, me or David Cooper Ryder?
I I don't know. I don't know. David Cooper Ryder at least did a bunch of science and research around it, from my understanding too. So,
Okay, I'll
um,
say I'm more naive then.
well, but here's the thing. Without giving too much away, uh, the definition of naivete is not what most people think. At least it didn't start out that way. Right? Being naive actually used to be a more neutral to positive term, and it meant just being natural or authentic. And so, if you're truly asking me who's more authentic, you or David Cooper Ryder, I don't know David, so I'm going to go with you still in terms of being more authentic, Nick.
I'll have to have him on the show and let him listen to this
You can
one.
find it out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ask them all about
Then we could have an authenticity dance off or something. I don't
it. Hands off.
know. So we've kind of already talked about the future a little bit, but I mean, in sharing your mission, it's like that definitely it's something that I can see carrying forward into the future. But there's the program that you were talking about that you're working on that it sounds like you're trying to grow into more of that, but are there any parts of what you'd like to see happening that we haven't talked about already?
Maybe one of them, and this is still nascent for me, is part of the purpose statement I shared is evolving education. And one of the uh, philanthropies that Econic has been most probably consistently involved in over the last 8 years now is the Acton Academy Children's Business Fairs. We started supporting the Omaha one like in 2016 or 17 when it first got started, and we've been supporting the Lincoln one as well for the last few years since it's been in play. And what I love about Acton Academy in general and then these business fairs is they are trying to evolve and shift education into one that believes in the potential or what they call the hero's journey of every learner and helps them through guides, not teachers, to be able to cultivate learning, curiosity, self-exploration, all of those sorts of things in collaboration with people that are different and of different ages, et cetera, in their classrooms. And so I share that because I think that's another thing that I'm intrigued with in the future is other models of education that help maybe create some more of the adaptability that I at least hear from employers that they wish that they were seeing in some of their workforce. Um, and it was truly after some of these sessions with executives and leaders where my colleagues and I are looking at each other saying, if we can't get these like 40, 50, 60 year olds more adaptable and more open to change and questioning their beliefs, like uh, where else could we start on this so that we could also be making a difference and other ripples of impact? And that's when we said, well, it's probably the education side, because by the time you're 18 and you've had so many years of um, maybe more black and white thinking and reinforcement through external grades and performance in those regards, it's difficult to think that you're going to be able to shift people in the workforce to then having all of that curiosity and self-motivation and all of those things that weren't reinforced in some of that. So that is also a futuristic thing, is to continue to think about ways to continue to help support the evolution of education.
How can I help? We can talk more after the podcast, but is there anything else you'd like to share with listeners?
No, I thank you for doing your work, Nick. It is obvious positivity and human flourishing are important to your core, and more people following those things that feel important to their core and putting those things out into the world and seeing how the world takes and runs with them or responds to them, I think is what is needed in the world. And so I guess it's kind of back to that Howard Thurman quote about the sound of the genuine. You continuing to lean into this is important, and I appreciate it. And I just encourage all of our listeners to be able to take a beat and listen for that sound of the genuine that's trying to break through, so that what is the rest of the quote? So that we do not spend the rest of our lives at the ends of the strings that someone else pulls.
Wow. Agreed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick.